All right, and here we are, the Athletes First RV. The tour continues. We slowly move around Atlanta. Excited to introduce our next guest, Oliver Luck, Commissioner of the XFL. Thank you for spending the time with us here today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and, I got to be honest, I'm a Pitt Panther.
Oh!
You went to West Virginia.
I'm done. I'm dropping the mic and walking out of here.
Here we go. But what a career.
Hey, I hired a Pitt Panther, Doug Whaley, as my SVP. That was hard, right?
Yes.
It's hard for a Mountaineer to hire a Panther. No, Doug's awesome. It's funny. The more removed you are from your college days, the more you realize that, like, Pitt and West Virginia are effectively the same school.
Yes, totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, Sanford and Cal are the same, Ohio State and Michigan are, so I guess that's one of the reasons those rivalries are so robust, is they're basically the same place, right? Same cultural connotation, same part of the world usually, right? So,
and
anyway.
people. I think that was like, as a player, you're like, you can't talk to anybody from another school.
Oh, yeah.
And then as you get in your late 20s, 30s, and get
when I was in college, because we had, obviously, a ton of Western PA guys, right? So we'd go up to Oakland all the time to Pitt's campus, right? Froggies? Wasn't there a big bar?
Totally.
Froggies? I don't even know if it's still
Not there. It ended right before I got there.
Okay, yeah. We kept that place going, We had, occasionally there'd be a fight or something, but it was just a blast, right? Because all the guys knew each other. They all played high school ball against each other or together or whatever, right? So those were good days. And Pitt, back then, that was the peak, I think, of Western Pennsylvania high school football, right? So I remember distinctly, scouting report, and here's the Pitt defense. Every one of those 11 starters played in the National Football League. Every one, right? So it was incredible. I mean, Hugh Jackson, Ricky... Hugh Jackson, Ricky, can't remember, defensive ends, right? Just phenomenal talent across the board. Carlton Williamson in the defensive backfield, JoJo Heath. All those guys played in the league. Yeah. It was phenomenal. Right? And that was sort of the peak, I think, of high school football, right? Because most of them came out of Western PA, and then, you had declining population, mills started to close, all that sort of stuff, and the population really shrunk. But anyway, good days.
Yeah, good days indeed. And good days, I think, are now in football. I had a chance when I played at Pitt, wasn't good enough for the NFL like yourself, went and played in Australia.
Cool.
And caught the bug of, wow, football's big. Yeah. And now it's expanding, exploding all around the world. It's the fastest growing sport in Brazil. You obviously worked around the world in football, and now here you are back in the XFL. If you go back to your days, even in the NFL Europe, could you have forecasted a couple leagues in the United States happening as leagues were popping up? Not only NFL Europe, but there's leagues all over the globe.
Yeah. I think most Americans don't realize sort of the level of play outside of the U.S. and Canada, right? We all know the CFL. We don't really watch much of it, but we all know it exists. But there are leagues in Mexico. In fact, there are university leagues in Mexico. I was just yesterday with the national coach of the Japanese American football national team, and they've been playing football in Japan since the 30s, right? And they've got both company teams, which is a foreign concept to us. Like IBM. They've got a team in Japan, and Kajima, which is a big construction company. They've got a university league, so you've got a bunch of people playing in Europe and Australia, as you know, and all over the place. It's hard, quite honestly, to imagine, because it very often, the United States is dominant in a cultural sense around the world, right? Our biggest export is entertainment. Right, coming out of Hollywood, basically. And so in a sense, it's not a surprise that people are picking up on American football. It very often follows our American troops. That's the story behind football, for example, in Germany. Right, guys were over there after World War II, stationed there, and they started playing football. And the German kids say, hey, this looks kind of interesting. So it's cool to see. The quality of play in this country is still light years ahead of where it is elsewhere. But it's picking up, and we're getting some pretty good athletes. I just bumped into Morton Anderson.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And Morton was in the news because Adam Vinatieri, with the Colts, who's the last NFL Europe player to be still currently playing in the National Football League, Adam broke all of Morton's records, but Morton's a Danish guy, right? And, I love seeing him. He was, he's a Hall of Famer. He's wearing his gold jacket. He was over at the Radio Row yesterday. So, and that's a kicker, and you kind of expect that, right? I played back in the day with the Oilers with Tony Fritsch, who was an Austrian. And Tony was a member of the Austrian national soccer team before, relatively late in life, he realized he could kick a football pretty well, and he came over to Texas because he played for both the Cowboys and the Oilers. And he used to say about the football, he said, "I kick him." because the ball is a masculine case, right? In his native tongue, German, he says, I kick him, you know. And anyway, so that's not a surprise in the sense that football has sort of taken off and is now becoming more popular around the world, both as a spectator sport and as a participant sport.
So you hold a variety of positions in your career, right? You're from the NCAA, West Virginia AD, working the president in Houston, multiple sports leagues. When you get a call to run the XFL, what's that like for you with all of your experience, not only in football, but intercollegiate athletics, professional athletics, and what makes you say, yeah, I'm going to take a run at this and this thing can go?
I like startups, you know, and I've not always been involved with startups, but, you know, for a significant chunk of my life I've, you know, been exposed to startups, primarily with NFL Europe, 10 years of that, and then starting the Houston Dynamo, the MLS franchise in Houston, then moved down from San Jose, the old San Jose Earthquakes. So they're fun, right? They don't happen very often. It's not like the tech business or fintech or healthcare or whatever where there's lots of startups. You know, sports, it doesn't really have very many. Certainly college athletics been around for 150 years. You know, the NFL is 100 years old next year. So it's unusual to have an opportunity to start a league from scratch that's well capitalized. And that's the beauty of, I think, our league and Vince, is that, you know, he's committed significant capital to this league. And like any startup in any industry, you need to have capital, right, to withstand some of the downturns that you inevitably face or some of the challenges. So I got a call, and I had been aware that Vince was interested in launching this league, but didn't really think much of it. And, you know, this intermediary said, would you be interested in taking a meeting with Vince? And I said, sure. You know, I've always admired the guy. Don't think I'd ever met him, maybe in passing. Don't really follow wrestling, but am aware, you know, that he's built this tremendously successful company, publicly traded, you know, $1 billion a year revenue, and a great storyteller, right? He's a very, very sort of instinctive businessman. So anyway, we sat down and spent a couple of days just talking about his vision and what he wanted to accomplish, the mistakes that were made back in 2001, 18 years ago, with XFL 1.0, and I thought this is a pretty cool opportunity. And I love football, right? So it's fun to work in a space that you literally, you know, love doing on, 365, 24/7.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I get to work at the Pac-12 networks from day one, and now you feel the wins and you feel the losses, and you're prideful of the bruises or when you have an accomplishment. So I'm curious now, if we got to start a league, which you get to do, being around the NFL, being around college, being around NFL Europe, it's almost as though you have the answer to the test of this is what it could look like right now, whether it's the gaming element, whether it's the health element. When you piece that together and set the rules and the new rules that we're going to hear about, how do you come about that? Because it's almost as though, like, if you're a football junkie, you can't ask for a better plate to say, oh, I want a little of that, a little of that, a little of that, no more of that.
Yeah, it's a nice buffet.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know, the opportunity, Vince and I talked about this a lot, the opportunity to reimagine the game, right? To, you know, create this, up-tempo game with more rhythm and more flow at less downtime, less idle time, fewer breaks, fewer stoppages. You can't eliminate stoppages because they're part of the game, but, if you watch a game and really break it down, there's a lot of dead time in football. Every referee's review in the NFL takes up 2.5 minutes, right? So, up-tempo game, 80, 85 plays per team, very much like a sort of a Pac-12 right. or a Big 12, offense. I think, better defensive players, right? Tackling seems to be optional nowadays in a lot of college football. Fewer stoppages, fewer breaks. We've got, maybe a dozen or so innovations. We're looking at a new kickoff that we think keeps the kickoff return in the game. I mean, if you like to watch kickoff returns, they're fading fast. They're an endangered species almost, right? Because in the NFL, everybody kicks it out of the end zone. In college, you take the fair catch, and start at the 25-yard line. So we got a couple of CFL rules that we think make some sense that I think people will like. As I'd mentioned, most folks don't really watch much CFL, most Americans at least. So the opportunity to reimagine the game, right? And that was awesome, right? So we were able to gather some pretty smart people, Jim Caldwell, John Fox, Super Bowl coaches, Doug Flutie played up in Canada. Doug is a really smart guy, a bunch of tech people, some health and safety people, some doctors, right? Because the rules that we are changing, we want them to be safer, right, for the game as opposed to less safe, 2001, you think about it, nobody was talking about head trauma. Now, everybody's talking about head trauma. So we've got to be very sensitive to that as well. So that opportunity was awesome. And any football guy, or gal, any football person, would love the chance to say, all right, we're going to sit down and kind of, we have these sort of overall goals of, a game under 3 hours, up tempo, yada, 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 fewer stoppages, fewer breaks, less idle time, more meaningful plays, fewer meaningless plays, and that was a great opportunity. I couldn't pass it up. No football person could.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. It seems to be an absolute blast. So I go to the NCAA side of this. In 2011, there were 17 grad transfers. In 2017, there were over 200. I mean, guys are transferring. The transfer portal's crazy. Yeah. How do you feel about the eligibility of this league? And can guys leave early? Can they come out of high school if it's a freak defensive end that maybe doesn't qualify and would have to go to JC or have to go to a prep school?
Sure.
And can you leave maybe if you balled out as a freshman and you don't want to play anymore?
We're not subject to the National Football League's collective bargaining agreement, obviously, right? That's a contract between the Players Association and the owners, and the only people that are subject to that are the NFL clubs, the 32 teams in the league. So the 3-year out of high school eligibility requirement that the NFL has, doesn't affect us. So we could take a player who's played 1 year of college football or 2 years of college football, or somebody who's not academically eligible or just needs to earn some money, right, to support mom, dad, whatever, or a kid straight out of high school theoretically, or a kid in high school. Subject only to local labor laws, but we're certainly able to do that. We've talked a lot about that. I want to move carefully, right, particularly when you talk about high school kids, because there is an element of your physical and mental maturity. I was just yesterday with Herschel Walker, who kind of broke the mold way back in the day when he left early from Georgia to go play in the USFL. And so it's, and you think about, ball players over the years, and there's certainly been a handful of guys, very few, that were probably ready to play professional football at age 18. I think of Herschel or Leonard Fournette or Adrian Peterson or who knows, Trevor Lawrence, right? True freshman, had an unbelievable season. But I also, we have to be very careful in how we do that. I have a lot of respect for I love college football. I think it's awesome. It's a great institution, and it's also something we need to discuss with our head coaches, right? So we're in the process of hiring our head coaches. We'll get that finalized probably by mid-February or so, and that's something I want to sit down with our coaches and talk about, right? Because that's going to be important, And anyway, we're thinking along those lines, and it's kind of neat to sort of have an opportunity, to consider, college kids, because there's 10,000 young men playing Division I football, I think, or something like that. It's a significant number, right? The vast majority, won't make professional, aren't professional grade, so to speak, but there's some that are.
In college now on campus, more so than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, anxiety, depression are at all-time highs. And I think it's a lot due to a device, right? Guys are branded and said, you're this. You're the number one quarterback in the country. You are the number one dual threat player in the country. You are the projected top draft pick. And they have to live up to this stigma that somebody gives them. Curious, how do you feel about that just overall? Because the pressure on kids now, I think, is so much more to live up to an expectation coming out of high school than the reality of who they are as a player.
It's a serious issue, and I think over the years, there's been a growing realization on campus that a lot of the student athletes, that the athletic department, takes care of in a sense, right? But a lot of those student athletes, have anxiety issues or mental health issues. I think it's fairly well established that the distribution of mental health issues in the athletic population is more or less the same as it is in the general population. And mental health is not something that, we do very well in this country. So XFL, we've got a medical advisory committee that consists of 3 people: a neurologist, an orthopedic expert, and as well as a mental health expert. Because I think that sort of the culture of athletics, and it's not just football; it's many sports. Hey, tape an aspirin on it. Suck it up, get out there and play, right? And a lot of kids are mentally tough that play sports, but that doesn't mean they don't have issues that need to be addressed. So it's something that's important to us. And I think, to be fair, all across sort of the NCAA NCAA landscape, you've got more and more schools that realize that and, are bringing mental health experts on to work with, those student athletes that might need some guidance and some help.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just a week ago, I went back and watched the XFL documentary just because I wanted to see the 30 for 30, and you got all these leagues popping.
It's pretty good. It's a good show. Charlie did a very nice job putting that together.
Yeah, it was phenomenal, and I hadn't watched it in a couple years. With all these leagues popping up, I think a fan at first might say, "Oh, the NFL's over." That's all I got. And there's this appetite of 40 million plus football fans that want football all the time. Yeah. When you saw that and all the elements that we just talked about, whether it's mental health that athletes are dealing with, health insurance that athletes have to deal with when their careers are over, all the holes that you can fill and say, let's fix this game versus being a version of that documentary, which was really loud. What's that like for you to be able to have answers to this life that you've lived and committed to around this game?
Well, it's interesting. I think the game of football, pro level, NFL, college level, even down to high schools, is probably, I think, being played at the highest level ever. It's unbelievable, quite honestly. You think about all the support, sort of elements that exist, between nutrition and better sleep and strength coach and performance experts and mental health people. And, young quarterbacks are throwing, 10x passes what, let's say Terry Bradshaw or, Warren Moon or any of the greats of the past through, you know what I mean? Not just in games, but, it's a 12-month-a-year deal, right? 7-on-7 and spring ball in the high schools and all this stuff. So I think it's being played at the highest level ever. And that's a good thing. So all the metrics, I think, are pointing in the right direction. It's not to say there's not challenges, head trauma being one of them, but I think people are very, sincerely trying to come to grips with, all those issues. So basically what I'm saying is I think football's at a high watermark right now in this country. It's as popular as it's ever been. And as I look around, other leagues starting up, that's a sign that it's a sign of vibrant, robust American entrepreneurial spirit that's finally kind of found its way into sport, and into football. I think that's good. And I think there's, clearly an opportunity, right, after the NFL season's over, right? I do think some people say, oh, sigh, the season's done. Now I can relax a little bit, but there are a whole bunch of folks that say, what am I going to do on Sunday? I don't know what to do with myself, right? I want to watch more football. In fact, our research indicates that of the 85 million people who say they're NFL or college football fans, about 40 million are self-identified, diehard, passionate fans, and they want more football. It has to be good football. It's got to be good quality of play, and that's up to us to provide that. But I do think there's a potential, right? Because I love the game. I like the game. I respect the game. I watch the game a lot, and I have a little void right in my life after February. Whatever the date is of the game, 3rd this year, 4th, whatever the game. And we all have a little void because we missed the game. So that's the opportunity that I think exists. And I think, people say, is there enough space for multiple, spring leagues? And I say, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think an area that doesn't get talked about enough, and just talking to coaches, they love these new leagues because a lot of them they're scrapping to just find a job, right? If they get let go somewhere in the NFL, it's where do I hang out? I got to move my family again. Or in college, I got to keep recruiting. If I don't have recruiting ties, I can't get this gig. And now they have an opportunity to make some money and coach and have a pseudo life. I think there's this pendulum swinging back in the coaching profession, saying you don't have to coach and be away from your whole planet for 24/7. I'm
telling you, coaches, you talk to Urban Meyer, for example. Being a head coach of a major college program is stressful. Those guys need some help from the mental health experts. And the amount of time, even with private planes and all that you spend recruiting, and away from your family, is brutal on those guys. And they wouldn't have it any other way. But there's a lot of coaches that just can't do that for 30 or 40 years. And so I think you're right. There is a pendulum that's sort of swinging back a little bit to, hey, you don't have to do the Dick Vermeil, sleep in the office, wake up at 5 a.m. and be there until midnight, grind. That's not the way to do it. Now, it's not to say that, you can lollygag your way through a major college or NFL coaching experience, but I think, people need to work smarter. And I think now with analytics and all this stuff, people are starting to work a little bit smarter. But there's lots of very talented coaches out there. And you're right. At the end of the day, we're a startup league, and we're going to offer jobs to almost, 450 players and 130, 40 coaches and a whole bunch of football support staff, directors of football ops and athletic trainers and strength coaches and equipment managers and video guys, right? So, that's part of the entrepreneurial greatness that is the United States and the free market system. So that's kind of cool as well.
All right, so before we let you go, I'm curious. All the experience you've had and now running this one, what in this experience and this run you have up to a season next year this time we'll be talking about week 1.
That's right. Right around the corner.
I can't wait to broadcast that one, right? And I'm sure a lot of my colleagues will be jacked about this new league and opportunities. But for you, with all the things you've done, what brings you the most joy among this experience that you're in right now?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because it's really just what we talked about, which is the opportunity to give jobs to young men, right, who want to play football. And there's a limited time. It's a rough game. It's a physical game, obviously, right? I'm stating the obvious, but there's a limited career that players have professionally to play football. I think the average NFL career has always been below 4 years. And, we have an opportunity to provide jobs to guys who, at that stage in their life, in their 20s, basically maybe early 30s, all they want to do is play football. That's their job. So, whether they can earn $50,000 or $200,000 or whatever the money is, that's almost secondary, right? We get to provide jobs to players, to provide jobs to coaches and other stuff. That's very gratifying. It really is. That's very gratifying. And we get to provide, hopefully really good entertainment for a whole bunch of fans, both live and, in stadium as well as on television.
Hey, Oliver, I've talked to so many athletes where they're like, if you're a lawyer and you spend X amount of years in college preparing for that, or a doctor, then you spend 30 years in your profession and you retire. Athletes, we give our whole lives to a game, and then usually we're done at 30.
Yep.
What do we do next? So I love this, because those that major in football can now major in football, whether they're coaching afterwards or playing when their NFL careers may be done, or fighting to get back and didn't have the opportunity they could have. So I commend you, man. I think this is incredible.
Well, a compliment coming from the pit guy, that means something.
It doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't happen very often at all.
The backyard brawl. No brawls here.
There we go.
Thank you for the time.
This is awesome. Great. Appreciate it very much. Thanks.
You got it.
All right.